So Rob, anytime that we release material like this, De La Hiva, Reverse De La Hiva, Mantis, on things like YouTube, we get comments either like, dude, that would never work, I would just leg lock you, or, more politely, I would love to use this material except I can't because there's too many leg lockers at my school. Or, dude, I would just punch you in the balls in the street. So we're going to save the third topic for another day. You know, the streets, the video. But the first two are semi-valid concerns, right?
Yeah, absolutely. These guards do involve you at some point, either intentionally or unintentionally, having one of your legs kind of dangling out there. And this is one of those things that, like, it seems like you could leg lock someone, but it tends to be, and again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but people who say this tend to have a pretty superficial understanding of the positions, because it is actually quite, or a superficial understanding of leg locks in the sense of like the old school, dive on a rolling toe hold, catch a standing straight ankle lock kind of stuff that would work on somebody who's just not at all savvy to leg locks. So, we're not trying to convince you to purchase the modern leg lock formula and develop a savvy to leg locks, except that we are. But if you don't have the time for that, this is going to be kind of a short course that we're giving you on preventing, avoiding, dealing with leg entanglements from these particular positions. And just like, before we get into that, some quick kind of like myth busting. The guard players who play, reverse De La Hiva, these kinds of, they're really savvy to this kind of thing. The idea that you can just throw on a foot lock. I mean, if you can find me any competition footage of a high level, De La Hiva, Mantis, reverse De La Hiva player getting foot locked, like it's almost impossible for it to happen. The Estima lock is probably the only really legit threat there, and we're going to address that.
I'm sure it has happened.
I'm not saying it can't happen.
And I think Paulo Miao got caught in a horrendous toe hold.
And just ate it, and so that is something that we should discuss, because the Miao brothers are kind of held up as an example of like, yeah, but you can't toe hold them. They're not a good example, because they don't necessarily defend the foot lock. They just eat it. So we're not suggesting that. We're not suggesting that you just disregard the safety of your ankles, but for the Meows to be held as an example, I'm going to give they have to eat them. I'll give the counter example of Kai Otera, who plays a lot of these styles of guards and doesn't really eat footlocks. He's just, I don't want to say he's immune to them, but he's got such an understanding of body positioning and how to adjust that he's not really eating the footlock. He's just making sure that it's negated, and that's what we're going to try to give you is, how do I negate, how do I extract my legs, how do I just play this guard with confidence, or these guards with confidence, knowing that the footlock is actually a very low percentage attack, and it's only going to work on me if I'm kind of ignorant to it. Okay, before we get into the specific movements and techniques, we need to cover the kind of general concepts, which are foot positioning, leg pummeling, and keeping your own knee. So when we say foot positioning, throughout this entire series, we've really been emphasizing the idea of keeping your foot behind your partner's knee pit in the De La Hiva and Mantis scenario. So just to reiterate, if I'm playing my no-gi De La Hiva, I am not sticking my foot out here. This is where the kind of preeminent, I would just footlock you bro kind of logic comes from, which is you just snatch it. Yeah, which is... which is like, and again, I'm not saying that that's not valid. If I were to try to camp out here in this guard in no-gi, I would expect to have some leg lock attempts thrown at me. So I will either have my foot behind your knee, or I will have my foot on the ground. Same thing with the reverse De La Hiva guard. Generally speaking, foot will be on the ground, it'll be back here. If I do place it here, it'll be very kind of tentatively on the hip bone with the ball
with
of
just
my
the
foot.
tip.
With just the tip. Right, I promise. And in the Mantis, it's the same thing. I'm here. I'm not going to camp out with my foot here. Although it would be a little bit safer in the Mantis, just because your ability to do something with this leg is more restricted. But even then, foot stays here. Foot stays here. So as long as we understand our basic foot positioning, how it should appear in no-gi, we're hiding our feet, we're maintaining proper kuzushi, because that's the other aspect of this, is if you're constantly trying to gain your balance back, you're not setting up, grabbing my feet, and pulling me into any kind of leg entanglement. So just playing the guards correctly with good foot positioning should eliminate any leg entry. So, series done, let's go home. But, we are going to screw up, right? So the next thing is just leg pummeling, and in particular, because we have the De La Hiva to start with, if you're starting to pull my leg in here, just the idea of driving this leg in will allow me to pummel the other leg out. So like we'll get into more specifics on that. And not even just using this leg, but as soon as you start to grab my leg, moving it out, like all these pummeling motions where we use the articulation of our hip and the bend of our knee to remove our foot from any kind of position is going to be really helpful. And then as this is going to relate more to like back steps and things like that, but keeping my own knee. So as long as I keep my knees to myself, you're not backstepping into a knee bar. The problems come when people start getting adventurous here like this.
They've done too much gi.
Way too much gi. They're not worried about knee bars, and you just sit in to a deep knee bar right off the bat. So you know that's just like again a lack of awareness of what is potentially out there, and if, you know, frankly, rule sets protecting people who basically become bad grapplers as a result of that extra protection. So I don't want to get her on a rant about nanny states, but that's the result you have, infantilization. So as long as my knee
close to your chest.
I keep my knees to myself. If my knees start to go towards you, I've got a problem. If my knees stay close to me, you know, in the reverse De La Riva, if I start to bring this knee way far over towards you, there are all kinds of things you could do. I clearly shouldn't do that, right? Same thing with this. If I just start to stick my leg in, there might be something you can do. But as long as I keep my knees on my side of you, I'm okay. So those three concepts, foot positioning, leg pummeling, and keeping your knees to yourself, as long as you keep those in mind, we'll either negate the leg lock attack before it occurs, we'll interrupt it partway through, and then, you know,
Or make it so much weaker.
make
if
it
does
significantly weaker. You know, what we're not going to cover in this section is full on like how do I defend a fully applied heel hook. That's a different instructional. But as far as prevention and extracting ourselves, you know, most of the way through before an actual submission occurs, we should be able to cover all that in this section. All right, since one of the themes of this instructional has been beating a dead horse, preventative foot positioning for leg locks. If I'm in the regular De La Riva guard, I do not place my foot on the hip. I don't even really want to place my foot on the side of your knee. Anytime you can snatch up my ankle, that's going to be a problem. So we're always placing our foot in the pit of the knee or on the ground in base. The only reason we put our foot on the ground is to, you know, amplify these movements. We don't just kind of hang out with our foot on the ground, right? Not that we hang out here, but like our general positioning is mostly with the butterfly hook behind the knee, which is going to negate anything. And then any of the like the transitional steps, like when we're attacking the shotgun sweep or the tank sweep or anything like that.
We're not going from here.
Right, exactly. I'm not just like kind of hanging out. You're moving around. But when I do place my foot on your thigh for these reasons, I'm not stepping my heel into a position where the heel itself is accessible. I am stepping on your thigh with the ball of my foot, and my heel is kind of like underneath. So if you go to snatch it up now, certainly not in the amount of time it's going to take me to just do that. And then you're getting moved off balance, all that sort of thing. So I'm not concerned with you snatching my heel up unless I present you with the heel itself. Right? So that's a really important detail on like the general foot positioning. So butterfly hook here with the reverse De La Riva guard, and it's the same sort of thing. Making this X is going to be a common preventative measure. This foot being on the ground, there's no access. And in the reverse De La Riva, this is where like the most important one comes into play, which is just putting ball of my foot in, or even stepping your foot more so like almost against like the liver area here, like this. So you're creating really strong structure, and there's no way that your foot can be turned, because that's really the threat here. Like, and let's be honest, that's the most legitimate foot lock against the open guard out there. The rolling toe holds and like snatching up the straight ankle locks, man, I've just never seen them work against a savvy opponent. But I've seen some really good guys get hit with the Estima lock. It's a pretty legit submission, so we do have to respect the hell out of that. Keeping our foot here, keeping our foot a little bit more here is going to solve that problem.
Once it drifts here.
Once it drifts over, we'll have an answer. Sure. We'll have a video on defending it, but prevention is better. X, foot on the ground, that takes care of it. In the mantis, again, foot is always back here because we're always using this rocking motion, this kazushi, and I mean here there's absolutely zero threat of a leg lock. Right? If
you could at this point put your foot on my hip.
Yeah, I could try to, but even here, like if you were to try to ankle lock me, you're so off that, like there's absolutely zero threat there. So yeah, like the mantis is not a guard that I've ever had to defend leg locks while playing. I have defended leg locks while playing reverse De La Riva or just the regular no-gi De La Riva. So preventative foot positioning should, like, really, if you just do that, you don't have to watch the rest of this section, you know. But again, we're gonna screw up, we're human beings, so do watch the rest of the section, but focus more on the correct foot positioning and it'll save you a lot of trouble. Okay, our first kind of specific movement is going to be extracting from the standard ashi, which would happen if I now either camp out here, just leave my foot dangling, and Stefan snatches it up. So part one, if we go back, is when you touch my heel, I simply move my leg out. So that's just not really extracting from ashi, but just anytime somebody starts to grab your heel, your job is to pull your knee to you and pummel the leg out. But let's be realistic. You're going to get caught once in a while with the foot in the armpit, and then your partner will typically be bringing this leg in and falling to this side. So the finish here would either be a straight ankle lock or a heel hook, and either one of those, not great for me, the heel hook being the more dangerous of the two. However, built into this position, if you stand back up, is the method of extraction. My foot, which is here behind your knee, is going to start to slide up towards your crotch. So as you snatch this up and start to drop, I just keep my foot really strong in here.
Your red foot.
My left foot, yeah, my red foot, exactly. So here you see the validity of all the YouTube experts on the ball stomp, which is to be distinguished here from our
taint sweep and dick post.
Yes, so we're not using a taint sweep here or a dick post, we're using a ball stomp. We want to make sure that this foot, because if this gets too tight, now all of a sudden, groin strikes don't work.
Yeah, I'm also clamping your leg here.
Exactly. So if you make it all the way to ashi with the proper wedge mechanic here and the foot positioning on the hip, this doesn't work anymore. And you can actually get really tangled up here. So what needs to happen is, again, it's a timing thing, and it's just a recognition of where, like proprioception, where I am in space, where you are in space. This extension before you get into position, for one, prevents you from clamping down and immobilizing my hip. You know, we've talked about in the modern leg lock formula the 3 ingredients for a good leg lock: hip immobilization, control of the knee, and then control of the lever that you're attacking. You being able to suck my hip in with your heel and create this wedge achieves the first two, and then the control there achieves the third one. If I manage to get you out here, my knee is free and my hip is fairly mobile, so even if I can't extract my foot from there, I can do the basic defense, I can get over top of it, and I'm achieving all of that with my foot in the ball stomp position. So let's do another rep.
Practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect.
So I got myself here. As soon as this is getting snatched up, I just keep my foot really strong in that position. If I need to aid the stripping of the foot, I can, but I don't do it by coming closer like this. I do it by maintaining the extension, getting rid of that. And so now, you can start to try to apply the finish. And there's just so much mobility here. I can always move over top. And then there's our reset, right? Yeah. You're going to bail.
Realistically, I'm going to bail on this and come back in your guard.
Exactly. But you're coming up in a position where, because your weight was back, the lever access that I have, you don't start with your foot in a great position. You've got to come up, in which case I'll be able to imbalance you or unbalance you, whichever you prefer. Come up. And now maybe I chase my own leg attack in a more advantageous position. Right. So I can sweep you, get on top. That's how you're going to extract from the standard ashi. Again, earlier is better. If we wait till the end, we get kind of bound up. The escape does not work, but this kind of cross side kick to the junk is an example of groin attacks. Oddly enough, working because I know more jiu-jitsu than my attacker, and I've got a better awareness of positioning, and I'm using my positioning to enable the ball attack to work.
And to be fair, we're not side kicking the balls.
No. We're pushing,
we're pushing his hips away.
We're taking the piss out of people who don't know what they're talking about and like to yammer away on the internet. But the idea that I'm striking you in the ball, that's not what I'm doing. It's again, depending on the circumstances, it's a gentle push all the way to maybe a relatively forceful shove, but it's not an and using that frame as a counterpoint to extract my leg. Okay, we're going to cover the defense for the rolling toe hold against the De La Riva guard.
This is a move that I used to do a lot, especially when I didn't know a lot about leg locks, and it's something that a lot of people that still visit my school try and do to me, and almost every time the result's the same.
So just to demonstrate the movement once, there's the rolling toe hold, captures my foot, captures my other leg, and then he applies the toe hold braking mechanics. So first off, let's just reiterate that that little back step to track my foot, that's only going to happen if I'm lazy with my positioning. If my foot starts to kind of get in here, but as long as I'm keeping my knee to myself, he goes through that back step, it's not really going to happen, right? So just let's cover that to start with. But my foot should be in here, it should be in the instep, I should be controlling that far lever, but I've screwed up. My foot is here, right? Even now, if Matt goes to roll through, as long as I'm controlling this lever and extending my leg here, I'm now going to transfer from the grip on his heel to the grip on his far hip. I'm going to roll him into the back take, finishing on the rear naked choke usually, because frankly, people are still going to be holding onto that foot. Like the type of people who go for this move are usually going to be holding onto the foot. So let's just kind of break this down a little bit slower. As Matt starts to roll, he's loading himself up here, and I'm actually going to stomp my foot to the ground. If I extend my foot too much, I might actually end up having to fight off the toe hold the whole time. But if I stomp my foot to the ground, I make my foot safe. I switch my grip to the other hip, and I'm going to scissor wedge, rolling him over, grabbing his shoulder here. Let's just turn towards the camera. If he's still holding on to the toe hold right now, I can hook in and scoot back. And now that breaks the toe hold grip. So if I keep myself in here, then I'm kind of maybe still worried, but as I scoot back, my knee travels underneath his ribs, breaking the toe hold, allowing me to hit the rear naked choke, finish on the submission. So this isn't a particularly good move, right? Again, if you look at high level examples, people playing De La Riva guard, gi or no gi, if you attempt to go for the toe hold, you're giving up your back. You don't have to be particularly skilled with the berimbolo. As long as you scoot and put the foot down and just know how to manage the technique, you're in no danger. We should cover, just in case you do get stuck without being able to take the back. If you do end up rolling and I didn't manage to do the back take and I'm forced to keep my leg fairly straight as a defense, as long as I can extract this foot, and all I do to do that when I put it back in is, no matter what kind of triangle he's got, I can just frame and take this leg out. If I just keep turning in the direction of the toe hold, I'll always be able to get myself out of it. Shouldn't be necessary though. If you stomp your foot to the ground, deny your partner the ability to rotate your tibia, you're going to be able to take the back. And particularly if you're a little bit flexible, even if your foot is fairly straight, you'll be able to climb onto the back, shed the toe hold, attack the back. I mean, I can't think of an example of somebody hitting this at the high level or attempting this at the high level that didn't result in either a back take or a near back take, or at least a break of the position. So
Yeah, generally with leg locks, I don't want to go off too much on leg locks in this DVD, but definitely when I go for something like that, I have no control. I have no ashigarami really. So if I don't have any control over Rob's knee or his hip, I'm just rolling through and throwing off my own alignment, hoping that I get a toe hold, hoping that he doesn't know anything about leg locks.
Just not something you want to do against a skilled opponent. Okay, so from this angle, I'm going to show you how the foot is going to the ground as Matt attempts to roll. As he goes through here, I'm stomping my foot to the ground with my knee ending up here as a strong wedge. Again, the scissor wedge. I can step on, we talked about this in other videos, if I don't have the leg dexterity, I can step on the calf. Now I can kick free, bring my foot in, scoot back, finish. And since we're discussing rolling toe holds, we do need to address the kind of standing toe hold where somebody just attempts to grip the toe and rip it from here, which again is not super valid, but anything that's biomechanically possible that you don't address early enough starts to become potentially threatening. So if I allow Matt to get to here and posture up, that's when the toe hold is going to start to come into play. But any kind of movement like this, I can always invert, spin myself, and now this is where you see the back takes start to take place, because as you're facing forward, attempting to rotate my foot, the rest of my body will rotate along with it, end up behind you. The greedier you are, the more likely I am to end up on your back. And not something you should worry about, but it is something you should worry about if you don't know that all you have to do is start spinning like a top to prevent the negative potential result from occurring. Okay, now we need to address the calf slicer, in particular this kind of rolling against the De La Riva calf slicer. So first let's just show, Stefan, if you could, what we're talking about here.
Backstepping, blocking this leg, getting the shin in behind the knee, passing underneath here by a variety of mechanisms, either grabbing here or gable gripping underneath the leg, and then rolling over the shoulder. And then from here extending and calf slicer.
There you go. So that's the movement. It's one of those like, we call it an Instagram move, you see it all
Yeah,
the time.
I mean it works.
Oh no, yeah, it totally works. It's one of those fancy, cool things that you're often shown because you haven't seen it before.
Sure.
So let's first address kind of the main limitation of that movement, which is that if I'm playing the deli, like if we go, so let's say from standing, is that if I'm playing this properly, you're never gonna backstep because I will be controlling this butterfly hook. If I've got my foot on the ground, you're still never gonna backstep because my De La Riva foot is gonna be glued to your thigh. So if you go to backstep it, and I'm just keeping my own knee and maintaining the angle, I'm never worried about that. So like when we're talking about addressing these foot locks, those initial concepts we talked about in the first video, like my foot positioning, we're not really leg pummeling here, but the third one, which is keeping my knees to myself. If I always keep my knee to myself in the De La Riva guard and I'm not extending, you are never gonna be able to, like right now, yeah, you could start to do this, you could trap my leg. But if I'm playing this position correctly, let's just like again beat this point to death. If I'm playing this position correctly, this attack does not exist. But let's say I'm being a little bit lazy, this starts to happen. Now, the next ingredient is this leg has to get cleared. Right? You have to roll underneath of it. If I'm here and you just connect to my hip, and I just sort of boot you in the chest, I don't have to worry about it. So that is really like, stage one, proper foot positioning. Stage two is I'm going to prevent the roll. So if you do happen to connect your hands, I'm framing, I can pummel my leg in, I can like kind of side kick your throat while flaring your elbow, or any number of options that will prevent you from going into the actual like calf slicer submission. So, level one is proper foot positioning, not sticking my foot here, keeping my knees to myself, having my foot behind the knee, all that good stuff will just simply take this attack away. It's not going to exist, right? Level two is I do manage to get my foot trapped, but I never allow the leg here to become a lever, become accessible to my partner. I will simply, even if he does like clamp on, I'll simply pummel my foot in, push him away, reset to a proper alignment where I'm not vulnerable to foot locks. And now let's get into level three, which is Stefan does manage to clear and he manages to roll through and we're here like this. If we end up here and Stefan has actually like secured my hip, I'll be honest, I don't generally think that the calf slicer is a high percentage submission, like in terms of finishes, because like even if you start to apply it,
You're straightening your leg.
I'm just straightening my leg, right? If you manage to get me like really loaded up here, then yeah, that's doable. And so I'm like, let's clarify our terms. I'm not saying that the calf slicer doesn't work. Sure. What I'm saying is that against people with my dimensions, so like long skinny legs, and people with very flexible, like, not everyone can sit like this. I've basically sat through fully applied calf slicers without ever thinking about tapping. But again, I'm not saying I can't be tapped with a calf slicer. It can happen if you do it correctly and you restrict my hip under the right circumstances. It's doable. But so many things have to go right. And the main ingredient throughout this roll, if we can just do this one more time, is that I can always extend my leg enough to create a frame.
And that's what a lot of people make the mistake of. They don't simply extend their leg.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever leg's in
so as you roll through, I extend my leg. It's really, that's even if you're holding my hip, unless you can get my heel towards my butt. There we go. Now if I go to extend my leg, it's way more of a problem. But if I'm partway through the roll already just extending my leg and, just turn, look this way to the camera, and I'm taking this foot and using that same ball stomp position to extract my leg, that's usually going to be how I'm going to get myself out of it at kind of the late stages. The calf slicer that I think is a little bit like more effective and maybe you even see a little bit more often is like the truck roll. So if I get to like, basically like the rolling back attack type position, you get to the truck and you see a calf slicer done this way. So this is one that can work, particularly if you see like this sort of rotation here applied. Again, we talked about that kind of concept with like braking mechanics, which is not just doing this and certainly never leaving this arm in here, right? Yeah. So keeping the arm on this side, like this is a pretty viable calf slicer. So if we just kind of switch that position, you can tuck your heel in. Yeah, exactly. So there we go. So even in this particular calf slicer, that same extension and then just keeping my foot underneath my other foot really allows me to break it. Now, it's not as simple as that, because now using this extension, you're gonna be able to take my back. So I'm not saying that, again, you can just like ignore the calf slicer, but that is a pretty like severe degree percentage-wise. Like, you know, you would say that you've pretty much 100% got me in a calf slicer at that point, or at least let's say 90%. If I said I'm gonna get you 90%, 95%, or 100% into a reverse heel hook, or into an arm bar, or into a triangle choke, right? Whereas you can put me into 100% of the calf slicer, and I still think I'm gonna get out. I don't know, even if it's just half the time, that still makes it kind of a shitty submission. But it's more than half the time. I would say, you know, 70, 80% of the time, given the correct dimensions, unless you're dealing with like one of the best calf slicer people in the world, you're gonna get out of it because it's not as like structurally damaging. When I say structural damage, it's not as controlling, leading to structural damage. The structural damage comes from you kind of sitting in the move and trying to eat it, and then definitely it'll rip your knee apart. But with the amount of hip mobility I generally have, again, unless we're talking about like full hip control from the back, you know, Charles Oliveira hit this in the UFC. I think most people will have seen that one. That type of calf slicer, it's not super hyper. So it's sorry about like the tangent, but I just do want people to understand it's not a big problem. You should be able to defend it early, mid, and late, which we wouldn't give you. Like, you know, when we're talking about the heel hook or the ashi, I'm not giving you the late version of escaping the reverse heel hook from the foot.
Eat it, and wait for the guy to get tired.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas with the calf slicer, it is possible to eat it for a certain period of time. You know, again, if you get injured, you get injured. You are, you know, you pays your money and you takes your chances if you're going to eat a submission of any kind. But don't recommend the calf slicer as the move to build your game around, because you're much more likely to tap people who aren't familiar with the position than you are with somebody who just kind of knows this kind of stuff. All right, now we need to talk about dealing with the back step. So this isn't something, again, like with all of these movements, this isn't something that should happen. If I'm playing the position correctly, correct foot positioning, keeping my knees to myself, and I'm ready to leg pummel, I don't really have to worry about this. But what it would look like if I didn't have this hook secured, like the butterfly hook on the far leg, and my leg got a little bit lazy. Not back steps, there's a knee bar here, right? There's the 411 here. Right? A good leg locker will make your life kind of a living hell from this position, because you're basically giving him his strongest, or certainly one of the strongest positions in leg locking. So, are there any other options that I haven't mentioned?
Don't think so.
All right. So let's start to address, like, first off, the actual like back step attempt, right? If I've got good positioning and my foot has come out, as Matt back steps, I'm just bringing my knee with me. I'm not allowing it to pass the line of his thighs. That's when I'm actually in danger, because he's pinning or immobilizing my hip, gaining control of my knee, and then eventually gaining control of the levers that he's going to be attacking, right? So just the act of, you know, we call it tracking. Again, shout out to Krishna Murja for that term, like hand tracking, foot tracking. So in this case, it's Matt back steps. I'm knee tracking, which is accessing this lever with my shin and just, you know, resetting or continuing to like imbalance and attack somebody, right? So just like early on, if I meet the back step with that, I'm never going to have any problems. If, however, I do screw up and Matt begins to backstep, blocking, and I mean, let's just be graphic, I'm going to put my hands right on his ass, right? That's going to prevent him from dropping into like the hip line, beating my knee. So as he drops back, like there's just no way I can reset myself, or if he happens to backstep and continue, I'm just pushing him off. Keep falling? I'm just pushing him off and my knee is staying outside of that danger zone. It's not crossing the line of his thighs. I'm just framing his butt. I can pummel my leg in. You know, I can start going into all that cool bolo stuff that we worked on, you know, earlier on in the series. But just making sure that that knee doesn't come in. And then, and not that I want to try to give you like really late stage scenarios, but if Matt back steps and he does capture my knee, I'm immediately turning my heel. Right? I'm turning my heel and I'm blocking the shin here. Once this gets hooked and this gets locked up where he controls both of the levers to my hip, I'm stuck in the position. I'm stuck in the position here. I'm gonna have to do a ton of work to get out. Whereas if I meet the back step with this turn, I frame out, I can extract my knee immediately. So I'm just kind of beating him to the punch. I know that the reverse heel hook is the most likely outcome of this, so I'm immediately just hiding my heel, accessing the lever to my partner's hip, clearing my knee, and just doing like, you know, the strongest defense, the main defense that you'll see for the 411 position as or before we're landing in the 411 position, rather than waiting until it's like fully controlled where Matt's got me in deep shit. So you've got your early stage, you've got your mid stage, you've got your late stage defense. Like I said, this shouldn't happen, but if it does, now you know how to keep yourself safe. Okay, here's how you can totally fuck up the reverse De La Riva guard. Okay, let's continue with that theme of beating a horse to death. I do not bring my foot into any position where my partner can access it. I keep it right here. But we are going to screw up. So if we have totally fucked up our reverse De La Riva guard, first thing that needs to happen is I remove my foot from the De La Riva hook position. That's provided I'm using this style of like clamping grip. If I've already got the underhook grip, then I don't need to release. So if I'm already here, because I'm going to start inverting. So if you're going to like learn a guard for self-defense, this is actually the one I recommend the most, the inverted guard, because I've got frames, my partner can't really hit me, whereas I can kick him in the balls, which as we know is the most effective self-defense strike there is, and I can kick him in the chin. So again, self-defense.
What about sport?
Well, for sport, it's probably not quite as useful. But yeah, I guess a few guys might be able to make it work.
Okay.
So yeah, I suppose you could shoot a triangle from here if you wanted like a sport guard, and you could potentially sweep someone. But really, the main applications of this guard are in self-defense
And countering the schema lock.
Yes, exactly. So, which is what we're going to use it for today. A little bit more niche than the self-defense environment. So, if I do have the underhook and I'm being a schema lock, I just complete the inversion. If I'm not underhooking yet, and I just have the grip, and the Estima lock starts to come on, I release, and I just move myself into the inverted guard. Again, controlling, I've got a good frame. I can use this to pummel my legs out. I'm always using frames when I'm in the inverted guard, and I can return back to a, like a less practical street guard, like the reverse De La Riva, or again, move back into the most practical street guard, which is the inverted guard. So the Estima lock it's a real threat. It's the realest threat amongst these like footlock attacks, so we do have to respect it, we do have to roll.
So by removing this hook, just to take it back to that niche sport environment,
Yeah.
by removing this hook, it allows you to partially invert
Yes.
or fully invert.
Or fully invert, exactly. So if this stays hooked in, I don't have a mechanism right now to go upside down. The underhook allows me to create that mechanism because I'm pushing in this direction against your shin, which allows my hip to gain its mobility. Right? Whereas where I'm here, I can't push in this direction. I can only pull, I can only keep you here. So again, it's an important distinction because those are both grips that you will see with the reverse De La Riva guard.
And you're changing the sort of sideways, toe holdy, heel hooky type pressure into essentially me trying to do an ankle lock the wrong way.
On the wrong side, yeah, exactly. As I start to turn, my heel rotates.
Yeah, there is no foot lock, leg lock, anything here.
No, exactly. So that's our defense against the Estima lock, our response to the Estima lock, which is to go to the most street practical guard there is.
Defense.
Coming soon from grapplearts.com. Okay, we need to cover a step across or kind of a roll to the outside ashi or to the 411, right? There are two variations, we're going to give you both of them. First, let's just quickly talk about or show what we're talking about here. From the reverse De La Riva, if Matt captures an underhook on my knee and steps across, and he's basically landing like almost in like a reverse or an Oshiro ashi and part way to the 411. So the logical conclusion of this is him sitting through to here and then capturing my other leg, moving into the 411 from here. The other movement we're talking about is more when he sits to this hip. So if he again underhooks like this, throws this leg over and sits down into the outside ashi, this usually becomes a direct attack on the outside heel hook. So these are both things that we need to concern ourselves with. Again, by far the best way of dealing with this is I never allow that to happen. My hand is tracking, my foot is Xing. Like any position like this is being met with a frame. Anytime he gains a lever control, if I can't immediately access the lever and break, I'm framing, making sure that step does not occur. When we do things right, life is easy. When we do things wrong, life is hard. So let's assume that somebody starts to step through. As he steps through, I'm accelerating his leg. So let's go back. If he can bring his thigh to my thigh, so go ahead, slow. This is where he gains control of my hip and my knee. Let's rewind. When he steps through, this is where he loses control of my hip and my knee. My knee's coming out. I can go into like all this cool back take type stuff. All right? So again, we talked about what are the concepts for defending leg locks from these guards. Proper foot positioning, that gets rid of the problem. The next step is keeping my knees to myself. So Matt underhooks my knee. As he steps through, I access this lever and I keep my knees to myself and I'm okay. So if we were to go back now to the second version where you're dropping back, so as Matt steps through and starts to drop back, I'm just keeping my knees to myself. If he drops to that hip, we're landing in a position where my knee is safe. I'll either be able to step my bottom foot inside of his knee pit to extract, or if that's not available because it's a little bit deeper, I can roll through, push on that knee pit, and extract. Either one is good. As far as somebody actually stepping all the way into the position, at that point you really just need to defend the positions. Right? This kind of gets us into like way deeper territory than we're going to cover in this instructional. We're talking about defending and escaping the 411. We're talking about defending and escaping the outside ashi and the various submissions involved therein. We'll be here for another couple hours, or at least let's say an hour. So there's material that you can seek out. Certainly modern leg lock formula. There's some really good material on the modern leg lock game out there these days. If you don't like the droning sound of my voice and my obnoxious jokes, but if you do, the modern leg lock formula is available. We'll give you all that material. But for now, let's beat that horse to death one more time. Prevention, extraction, rather than escaping at the end stage, and you're always going to be safe from leg attacks.
Guys, thanks so much for watching. It's really been a pleasure to share this material with you. It's been a pleasure for me to be able to pick Rob's brain as we've been going through this and fill some holes in my game. Also, thanks so much to Matt for coming out. Thanks, man.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
been really good to have you. If you're in town, go check them out at On Guard. It's a great school, great training environment, and thanks so much for coming out.
Yeah, definitely check this app and DVD out. It's going to be awesome, and I use Rob's instruction every time I teach, every time I compete, and his online academy is amazing, so definitely check out those resources, guys.
And of course, thanks to Rob. Rob, thanks so much for coming out. It was really a lot of fun, and I especially appreciate learning all that self-defense stuff from you. We really have to go deeper into the self-defense inverted guard.
One of these days. If I can take a moment to invite people to participate in our visiting student program. If you're not already familiar, my Academy Island Top Team is on Vancouver Island in Canada. If you can get to Vancouver Island, I will pick you up at the ferry or at the airport. You can stay at my home for free for a week. You can train at my academy for free for a week. Email me first, give me a few months, a heads up. We tend to be booked pretty far ahead, but it's a program that I really believe in. We love sharing our conceptual jiu-jitsu.
And if that sounds a bit weird, which it would, you've had a lot of people come and post reviews of it online.
Absolutely, yeah. If you go to our Island Top Team Facebook page or our website, you'll see a whole bunch of footage about it. We've had at this point probably a couple hundred visitors. 60 alone last year, and we're closing in on 80 this year. So a lot of people have come by. So far, none of them have been murdered. Yeah. So I love meeting new people. I love getting a chance to get outside of my instructor mode and actually having to converse with real human beings. It forces me to be a little bit normal.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about an aspect that doesn't involve you to converse with real human beings, which is your online site. You should also pimp that out.
Please. The Rob Biernacki Online Academy at bjjconcepts.net. Which involves a similar style of conceptual instruction. All of our 201 modules, which are a guard and submission modules, all our BJJ 101 conceptual stuff, our Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu drills. We've got a section, and I think this is unique on the market, a section called Pedagogy, which is for instructors or aspiring instructors, anyone who seeks to understand Jiu-Jitsu for the purpose of teaching it. So we've got a section for those guys, which is tournament coaching, designing classes, teaching seminars, all that kind of material is in there. So check that out, and if I can pimp something that maybe doesn't exist yet, I know you guys are talking about doing a crab ride, berimbolo, inverted kind of back take project. And so
A modern jiu-jitsu,
Yep.
Yeah.
cutting edge of inverted modern jiu-jitsu product.
Yeah, just introducing inverted jiu-jitsu, that more modern style game to the average person, and maybe helping them incorporate that into their already existing game and helping them become familiar with those abstract positions. I also just wanted to
Keeping them
mention
safe on the streets too.
yeah. I also just wanted to mention one thing about the online academy is there's also you can ask questions online after. Rob and Roy always updating and adding new videos, and then they do a really good job of following up with people that have questions in the Facebook chat. So you kind of get a live feedback when you get the academy. It's a really great deal.
All right, guys, there you have it. Puss.